Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of How Stories Work. Today, I want to talk about the argument of the premise and what that means for your story. If I head over to the premise builder and I come down here to the subtext settings, you'll see question number 2, what is the point of this premise? And after this video, it'll probably say, what is the argument of this premise? Here you have the premise: abandon, avoiding capture by someone, and you can find a loving relationship. So that's just a default premise. So if that's the kind of story you want to tell, you would just hit build the story and it would make it. Not every story is about abandoning a bad element or abandoning a certain motivation and replacing it with something else. But that's about 50% of the stories. The other 50% are ones where the main character is on the right track, and then it's the rest of the world that needs to abandon the way that they are doing things. If you want to tell those kind of stories, you just come down here to where it says abandon or maintain, and you just click maintain. Now you'll see the premise has changed. Keep focusing on the outside world by avoiding capture, and you can find a loving relationship. So avoid is no longer the problem of the main character and basically the problem of the entire story that then has to be gotten rid of. Now it's become a motivation for the main character to focus on so that they can then do the work that is necessary to get the rest of the world to change around them. That is the difference between those two stories. The abandoned one has the premise: abandon this character element, and then you can find something or achieve something or maintain your point of view. Keep focusing on the outside world by focusing on this element, and then you can find a loving relationship. Two very different stories. And what happens is if you do the abandoned one, you come down here and you see the main character's arc. The main character would move out of being motivated to run away from things to then going after things. So that would be either Old Henry or Lion King, Black Panther, Mad Max, Fury Road, those kind of stories where the story's about running away and then go after it. Even Finding Nemo is the same sort of story with Marlin, all about avoiding, making sure you don't get hurt. And then at the end, he says, go take your adventure. That's his arc. That's a changed arc. So in Dramatica theory, the two different choices are changed resolve and a steadfast resolve of the main character. Is the main character's resolve changing, or is the main character's resolve steadfast? And really, it's about whether or not the main character's resolve is changed by the end of the story. So did they get rid of something and adopt something new, or did they remain steadfast? These are one for one the same thing. But the question here is about the premise. It's not about the story form. It's not about the structure. It's more about what is it that you're trying to say with this story? Are you trying to say, hey, you should abandon this sort of thing and then you can achieve something? Or are you arguing for maintaining something? And if it's the maintain one, now see what the arc is. Now the arc has nothing to do with avoid or pursuit. It has everything to do with oppose. So in this kind of story, the main character is driven by somebody who tells them they can't do something. If you keep telling me I can't do something and I'm on the right path, I know exactly what I'm doing. So everybody's always against me saying, hey, you can't do this, you can't do this. And they reject every single thing that you do. If you keep focusing on avoiding what it is that they're trying to tell you, or maybe staying away from them, or even staying away from a group, anything where wherever that opposition is coming from, or even trying to prevent them, or even how about this, being prevented from doing something. So if you just keep focusing on, hey, nobody's going to tell me what I can do. Hey, if anybody tries to tell me or prevent me from doing what it is that I want to do, I'm just going to keep going for it. That main character didn't abandon an old way of doing things. They kept going forward, didn't let the opposition get them down, and then were able to achieve something. Where you see the change then is in the influence character, which is the other character that's diametrically opposed to the main character. And that influence character is somebody who's going to be motivated by freeing at the beginning. So maybe there's somebody that has wild ideas and they don't like to be locked down and they're all over the place. And then maybe by virtue of interacting with the main character, the way that they're both able to achieve something is to then have some control over their life by the end. Not that they're being controlled, but now that they have a direction to their life and they know exactly where they're going to go. And that's just as valid a story as the classic change story where the character is abandoning something. If you want to see the difference between stories that are arguing for a changed resolve and stories that are arguing a steadfast resolve, all you have to do is go into subtext here and you'll see MC Resolve. You just add that as a filter and then hit changed. And then what happens here is now this has gone through and looked through about 500 plus story forms in Subtxt right now, and has gone through. And these are all the stories that have main characters who abandon a certain way of thinking or a certain way of doing things for something else. So, like for instance, Rain Man, definitely Tom Cruise character changes. To Kill a Mockingbird, definitely Scout changes. Unforgiven, definitely William Money changes his resolve. And then if I go down to the bottom, which is all the more recent ones, Tenant, it is a change resolve. I know it's a really crazy story, but there is a story structure to it. Cajillionaire is one where she changes out of it. The Lighthouse is great. Robert Pattinson, he changes in a very drastic and tragic way. And then, of course, Mav, he completely changes. Doesn't abandon his wingman at the end. Abandon being reckless, and then you can compete against the best of the best. That's the argument of that story. So if I come back all the way up to the top, and then I try and filter out, let's look at all the Steadfast stories. And these are stories where the main character keeps focusing on what the problem is in the world around them and ends up changing everybody else. Amadeus is a great one. Fugitive is a great one. If you've seen that, Harrison Ford, Dr. Richard Kimball, I didn't kill my wife. In the beginning, Tommy Lee doesn't care, but then at the end, he's, don't tell anybody, and he's a little bit nicer. So that's a steadfast main character who has now changed the resolve of the influence character. And that's a very powerful message. Let's go down to the very bottom here to see the newest ones. Elf is a really great one. It's classic. The Will Ferrell character, Buddy, is completely steadfast from beginning to end, and he ends up changing his dad, who then grows a heart. Typically, a lot of kids' films are set up this way because kids like to think that they can change their parents. Let's see, what's another one? Crazy Rich Asians. Remember, that's the argument between the daughter and the mother-in-law. The main character toes the line, and then the influence character, the mother, changes at the end and comes to her side. Roma is another good one. It's the relationship between the maid of the family and the matriarch of the family. And the matriarch, she grows into becoming a stronger person by virtue of her interactions with the maid. And then, of course, Die Hard, which is a lot less complex than most stories, where the Bruce Willis character is completely steadfast, and then he ends up changing the resolve of the police officer on the outside. Keep focusing on how the outside world is being reckless, and then you can stop someone from stealing. So even Die Hard, which is very basic, shoot 'em up, good guys versus bad guys, even that has a story structure to it and a meaning to it. It's trying to say something. And in this case, it's saying, hey, maintain what it is that you're trying to do, and then you can change the world. So that's how those stories work. If you have any questions about any of this, please leave a comment below, and I will see you next time.